Cool. Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me till the bitter end and for the final presentation of this slot, is it? And then we're on to other stuff, yeah. So my name's Ben Jowett. I'm Head of Digital Construction Engineering at Wates Group. Got my colleague Emma in the room as well. We've got Steve Slater floating around somewhere as well. What I'm going to be talking about today is something a bit more human, let's put it, after an AI presentation. So a lot of presentations that I've done over the years have been more around specific use cases of technology and how we've applied it. This is more around organisational implementation of technology. How do you manage people through that process of change? How do you implement the technology? How do you get people to embrace it? And we're living it in real time at the moment, myself and Emma and the wider team. So just as a bit of a warm-up, decision making. Obviously, we got the AI element of it as well, but there's two lines on there, and you have to make a snap judgment as to which is the longer line. And your human side will immediately make an instinctual reaction as to what you think the longer line is, when in reality both lines are the same width. And there's a reason for that. Is a lot of our decision making processes act in either system 1 or system 2. So system 1 is the one that's in charge most of the time. That's the one that makes rule of thumb judgments or quick decisions, or even like breathing is controlled by our system 1 thinking. Me holding this and clicking right, I'm not really consciously thinking about it, I'm just doing it. That's system 1. It's unconscious, it's fast, and it's just us running on autopilot all the time. So that's just sitting back, chilling, and letting the system 1 do the work. System 2 is our much more methodical side of our brain, and that's only really in charge 5% of the time. And that's where it's quite labour intensive. We have to put a lot more methodical and systematic thinking to reach a conclusion. I'm sure the people that were developing the AI systems were applying a lot more of the system 2 thinking in their development rather than system 1. But there's this thing around in the industry around who's in charge when we're making these decisions as an industry. We're continuously getting inundated, having to make so many different decisions, whether it be a health and safety decision, a quality decision, a program decision, and most of the time system 1 is in charge when we're making those decisions, because we're just inundated with pure volume of stuff to deal with. And that's really what's at the core of some of the technology that we're trying to implement, is to try and enable our people to spend a bit more time in system 2 and let some of the technology do some of the system 1 thinking for us, so we don't have to spend a lot of time filling out forms and paperwork and rely on the technology to do it. So one of the systems that we've been implementing is a system called Deluxe, which I'll go into a bit more detail shortly. So it was just a little bit of a warm-up just to set the scene as to what this is all about. It's all around decision making, improving our decision making processes, which hopefully will improve performance in various different disciplines. So a little bit of context about Wates. So digital and BIM really started gaining momentum in the industry in 2011 with the Thou Shall Do Level 2 BIM in 5 years' time, which landed in 2016. We've also got SES Engineering Services as part of Wates Group. SES and Wates both became certified within a year of that Level 2 BIM mandate. And really what that drove really was a generalised awareness of structured information, data, collaborative processes. I think a lot of people got quite lost with the 3D model element of it and got hung on that, but really what was at the core of it was just having this collaborative and structured approach to managing information and data. In 2018, we obviously saw the ISO 9650, where we had a change up in gear, where the emphasis was much more about information rather than modelling. How do we apply that level of rigour to managing structured digital information and data? We became certified to that standard a few years later, 2021. And now we're seeing more recently pressures like the Building Safety Act, Golden Thread of Information, digital twin standard development. So we had the Flex 260, which is now being replaced by a series of ISOs. So even this year we've got the 30173, which is another number to try and remember on top of all the others. That one hasn't quite stuck with me yet, but we're just seeing this continuous evolution now of digital standards that has really started out from the BIM world, but now we're in this world of digital twins, artificial intelligence, and even back in the ISO 19650 world, we're seeing 19650 becoming a UCAS standard. So that basically is the people that check the checkers. So years gone by, when we were having our ISO 19650 audits, you just show them your beautiful manual and say, look, these are our perfect processes. don't go have a look in the kitchen cupboard and see what's really happening. But now they want to audit projects and see what's actually happening on projects. Are you actually implementing the systems and processes that those standards prescribe? And we've just literally been through that this year as a group. And we passed, just. A bit more on the context, I think it connects in very much with the digital twin stuff that we were talking about earlier around connected cities, smart sites, this, the growth of cloud computing, IoT data, sensors, all those different types of sources of data and what we're doing with it, and big data analytics, all that type of stuff. These are all sort of contextual factors that are layered on top of that, that good foundation of structured information and data. And we're really just starting to find our feet as an industry as to what that actually means. And, we're closely linked with the manufacturing sector as well. We have Prism Offsite Manufacturing, where we specialise in MEP offsite fabrication. This means different things to different organisations in different sectors, and I think construction is still trying to find its feet as to what this really means at a site delivery level, but it's there, it's coming. We were in the 5G session earlier around connectivity and how do we enable that level of bandwidth in the future of all these different devices that need to interact with each other. And this is one that I really like around the problem that we've got, I would argue probably as an industry, not just as an organisation, of the data landscape. And one of the things that we keep coming back to, and I think an interesting discussion point that we've not quite concluded in the artificial intelligence landscape, is how structured does data need to be for artificial intelligence to shine, or can you have semi-structured data or even completely unstructured data and it will glean some insight from it. We approach it from a point of view of we want our data as structured as it possibly can be to give us the best chance in the future, i.e. to be future-proofed. And these are sort of slides that I put up for some of our senior leadership teams around, our industry is currently sitting in, we've got a whole lot of data. Some of it's in Excel spreadsheets, some of it's in cloud-based systems, some of it's in applications, some of it might even, dare I say, be handwritten in notebooks. A whole load of data, and we can't really make sense of it. And we've progressively now got this digital strategy where we're picking off technologies one by one, how we can consolidate and standardise them in an organisation to make sure that we've got consistently structured data and information. So, and hopefully get to that point where we've got nicely arranged data that we can actually tell a story with, rather than just saying, look, we've got a lot of stuff and we can't really glean any insight from it. So part of our strategy at Wates to sort of move us forward in that digital realm, and this is where we start getting into the more human element of it, there's buckets of things that we're looking at that can enable us to have that digital future. So one of the things is the policies and the processes. Do we have a contemporary digital strategy that's reflective of current terminology? So we've just introduced one of those in the past year. Do we have the correct structure? So we released a new digital job family about a year, not even a year ago. And we're actively rolling that out across the group, where we're shifting from BIM to digital. We're moving document controllers into this concept of information management and all the training that goes with that. All these sort of like enabling, I call this sort of the boring stuff, but these like the really important enabling stuff to enable an organisation of our size. We've got 4,500 employees. This sort of stuff enables the whole cruise ship to pivot rather than just innovating in silos, as I like to call it. And now, even now, that job family's been live. I think I even have a slide on it later, but the job family's been live for less than a year, and we're already looking at how does that need to evolve again, because technology is just evolving so quickly. Training, again, it's not just, to use that term of innovating in silos, it's not just the BIM specialists waving the flag and say, look how great this stuff is. How do we move those 4,500 people along with us? How do we make the technology relatable? How do they see the benefit in it? All these sorts of questions, which hopefully I'll cover in subsequent slides. And then the other part, which is more the hard-nosed contractor side of things, but most sort of organisations, it's prudent to have some sort of KPIs as well, i.e. is this moving the needle on anything? I've introduced this stuff, what effect is it having over here? If I introduce this technology, am I seeing more margin in its purest form? Those sort of measures, and we're starting to develop measures of when we introduce technology, how do you actually measure tangible benefit and not just infer a benefit. So one of the technologies that we went out to procure was a new common data environment. So we went from a world where we had 4 different common data environments, if you sort of being conservative, where we had the SharePoint, projects running on SharePoint, we've got Field View, AirConnect, Viewpoint for projects, all these different systems being administered differently by different people in different regions, in different data structures, or completely unstructured, all these different sort of areas of CDE that just completely, not mismanaged, but not managed consistently. So we recognised the need to consolidate that into one platform, and we went through quite a lengthy process, which I've sort of indicated there, where to find the solution to our problem, we went out with an RFI to a whole series of vendors out in the industry, 8 or 9 different vendors for requests for information. We then whittled that down to 3 vendors to get more specific for a request for a proposal, i.e. how do you meet our specific needs. And then we tailored that down again to a one-on-one basis, where we then selected Dalux as our partner, and we started collaborating to say, right, how do we refine your product to meet our needs more specifically? And Dalux has been great in meeting us halfway in that. So we went through all the user acceptance testing, and part of this implementation as well, it wasn't just us innovating in silos as a BIM team or a digital team. Commercial people involved, quality people, site management people, planners, estimators, you name it. We went and spoke to the leads from all the disciplines, and this concept of digital inclusion is something that I'm quite passionate about. You know, the NHS use it, for example, for elderly people who don't know how to use the internet or something like that, but I think we don't really talk about it enough in the construction industry around, we're introducing all this fancy technology, how do we make sure site managers on the front line can actually interact with this technology and they're not getting left behind. So it's just considering that wider lens rather than just thinking, how can it benefit me? So we went through quite a lengthy pilot phase of about 6 months, something like that, to just basically validate, yeah, we've got the right product. And then we signed an agreement with Dalux December, end of last year. So now we're in full rollout mode, and that, to me, that process on the screen there, from we've got a problem to this is the solution, that's taken about 2 years. So it's been a long process. But now we're at a point where we've got a solution, and that 2 years is finished, and I feel like we're just getting started, because you know, the genie's out the bottle and projects are getting involved with it now, and which I'll touch on. So yeah, Dalux is the new common data environment. Just to recap on that, it's the environment to house up, for those of you with the 17412 standards in mind, it's all the level of information needs stuff for housing our data, our documents and our geometry, so drawings and models. Another concept of why we picked Dalux, this concept of doing more with less. So going back to that point of, you know, we had 4 different platforms doing similar overlapping things. I use the analogy of an iPhone in this concept of sometimes depending on the audience, I'll put technological convergence at the top. Fundamentally, it's doing more with less. And you think about an iPhone, and you know, you think 10, 15 years ago, how many different devices and processes you undertook to carry out all those different things, to browse the internet, to play a game, to take photographs, to watch a video, to print something. You're probably talking about 7 or 8 different devices there. Do all that in an iPhone now. And with us, with implementing Dalux, it's a similar sort of principle where we've picked one tool that does a lot more different things. So it's not just our CDE, but it's our field tool where we do our permits, we do our quality inspections. You can do clash detection in it, you can do quantification in it, you can ingest different types of 360 photography in it. So there's a whole different set of use cases, and for an organisation with so many people, it makes it much simpler for them to engage with the technology when they're not having to go to multiple different places for specific use cases. Like, there you go, that one tool covers all these different things, rather than, you know, go to that tool if you want to take a photograph, go to that tool if you're filling out a permit, go there if you're doing that. You can just be very clear around what the system is being used for. So just looping back to the digital job family to sort of support the rollout of Dalux, we timed it quite well. With our release of Dalux, we released our new digital job family to essentially say, here's the new platform and here's the new team or team structure to support it. And this is just to really emphasise how we've gone from that world of BIM and document control into a unified and holistic digital construction engineering job family. You know, even 5 years ago, you'd speak to a BIM manager and I just deal with the models, and you speak to a document controller, I just deal with, you know, workflows and process in the CDE, and there wasn't much cross-pollination between those. And really, when you look at it through the lens of ISO 9650, you're all in the same boat. So there's a slide on the digital job family. I'll not dwell on that, but again, we've just gone from a world where we've got 2 or 3 job roles, you know, BIM manager, BIM technician, and a document controller, where we've recognised all the distinct skill sets within a digital or a mature digital job family now. So, you know, I've not counted, but I'm sure we're, you know, knocking on 20, something like that, different job profiles, all the way from apprentice all the way through to a head of role. And then implementing this technology, you may have seen this one before, it's the Kubler-Ross curve around change management. Myself and Emma and the rest of the team, we live this out in real time of managing people that go through this change process, introducing Dalux into the business. We've seen people go from anger and confusion all the way to acceptance, and boom, they're coming out the other side and they're absolutely fine with it, all the way through to people that are stuck in the shock phase and no, I want the old tool, I want the old tool. And like I said, not everyone goes through every stage of that change process, but it's on us as digital leaders to manage people through that process, and not only downwards manage, but upwards manage as well. You know, senior leadership, when something isn't quite working, you know, the frustration is part of the change process, but we are getting there and we're learning along the way. So to support that change process, we've got a whole governance structure, which in the spirit of time, I won't go into too much detail, but we have everything from application owners all the way down to sort of project trench level, and allowing everyone to input at every level meaningfully. And also just to note that this application is being owned by our quality and IT team. So again, it's not being owned by a digital team, and that for me is the longer term sustainable way of doing it. It's not a digital is not a specialism that needs, you know, someone to own that application. It should be owned by our quality department, and they're being enabled by a digital technology. And then this is another aspect of it, and for those of you into your innovation, diffusion and theory, this is exactly what it is, a classic bell curve. Again, we're going through this process at the moment where we've, essentially this is how you implement new innovation across a population, and the first 2.5% of the innovators, I like to think most people who attend this conference probably sit in the innovators or the innovator bucket. It's like you get it instantly, you're ready to go, boom, let's have it. And then suddenly around 15% of the population, you hit this wall called crossing the chasm. And what that means is you really need to nail 15% of your population to really get those pragmatists who have actually seen it in operation and gone, I get it now, I'm ready to jump on it. And then the trick is to go after that next wave of pragmatists and get that population nailed, which for me is like the site managers and the quantity surveyors. They're the people to really win over. And then you get the skeptics or the laggards at the end who only change because they have to. So they will put down the notepad and red pen, but you have to take everyone else along the way first, and they'll go, oh, well, I have to change now because everyone else has. And again, to enable people through that process, we have a training hierarchy all the way from awareness video through to, you know, detailed technical training. Again, won't go into detail too much about that, but we've implemented a top-down training approach for all levels in the business to support people through that process. And then the last, I know I'm running short on time, but the last aspects of it is this KPIs side of it. We're looking at it through a few different lenses of use, adoption, and maturity. Utilisation and measuring that is, you know, is the system being used? Adoption is how well isn't it being used? So that's where you start looking at benefits. Is this moving the needle on anything? And then also maturity is something that we're increasingly looking at. Not necessarily, you know, what's the benefit and what's the return of investment, but what's the actual overall maturity of our department? You know, how many people have gone through these courses, or, you know, what's the general level of competence? You know, that's a big emphasis in the Building Safety Act, and the golden thread is measuring capability and competence, and it's also in 19650. How is our maturity growing, not just as specifically as a digital team, but as an organisation? You know, what's the general level of awareness of digital, and how do we measure that? But then also ultimately linking that to business outcomes in productivity, quality, cost, whatever it may be, safety. And then let me just double check how far we're going. Yeah, I can wrap all this up. I'm getting the 1 minute warning. We're onboarding Dalux as our group standard tool, but part of our strategy, and to coin one of Mo's terms from Mort, is this sort of this brick by brick approach and almost modularising the systems that we use. So, you know, we've got a field tool, we've got a CDE that's now plugged into our data platform, and we're pulling data out at a group level into our data lake, and we're moving to Microsoft Fabric later in the year, and we'll be doing all sorts of fancy things with Copilot and all that sort of fun stuff. But that's just the first one. You know, there's so many more tools that we need to integrate into that system, whether it's a system-to-system integration, or it's a data-to-data integration, or whatever other integrations come out in the future. That's what we've got our eye on, is how's this technology complementary to our data strategy, and what insight can we glean from that data? And that really just followed up with this concept of vertical versus horizontal layering. So a lot of people, when they talk about they've introduced the technology, they tend to think vertically around. I bought a reality capture tool. It does 360 photographs. It doesn't talk to anything else, but it does a good job. Horizontal thinking is more, well, you've taken that photograph. How does that have a knock-on effect with the surveyors, the design managers, the site managers, the directors? Is it feeding reports of what they need? And that's what we mean about horizontal thinking, which links to that data lake. How do we expose and make that data open to more people so they can derive insight and meaning from it as well, rather than it being stuck in one vertical? And then ultimately, just linking back to that decision making, the reason why we want to have all this data and automation is to essentially reduce the time that we waste on mundane tasks, filling out Excel spreadsheets and Word documents, and freed up our people's time to make high quality decisions, going back to that system 1 and system 2 thinking. Through having that repository of data, enabling that continuous improvement, feeding back the lessons learned to the beginning of the project cycle. And then the last one is obviously just maintaining really good digital records in light of legislation that's now here. That's it from me. I think I ran on time-ish. Thank you.